From the campus of Dixie State University, CEC TV presents Meet the Candidates Live, the St. George City Council Roundtable discussion. Now, introducing the candidates, tonight's moderator, Eric Young.
Welcome to the St. George City Council Candidate Roundtable, coming to you live from Dixie State University through the auspices of the Community Education Channel here at Dixie State. My name is Eric Young from Talking Point Live, and it's my pleasure here to conduct this roundtable. We would like to get to know who our 2015 St. George City Council candidates are going to be, and so we're going to give them each a few moments to introduce themselves first off, and then we'll establish the terms of the discussion from then on out. So Greg MacArthur, let's start with you.
All right, well, thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm very happy to be here this evening and to have this opportunity to introduce myself to you all. Just to tell you a little about myself, I'm a local here. I'm from St. George, born and raised here in St. George, went to Dixie High School, graduated from Dixie State University, went to Brigham Young University, got my degree there, and then got a master's degree, an MBA from Southern Utah University. For the last 5 years, I've been working as the president of the St. George Chamber of Commerce. I've been very involved in advertising St. George to the world, letting people know, sharing our little secret, why St. George is such a great place. I've been very involved in helping businesses succeed and be heard here in Southern Utah, and got involved in politics. I have a family. My father was quite involved here. He was the mayor of this town for quite a few years, so I've been around in city government for quite a while. You know, I have a strong love for this community, and I think I bring in a lot of skills and know-how and connections that I could use to represent the people of St. George well on the City Council.
Great. That's Greg MacArthur. Next up is Kendall Clements.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us as candidates here tonight. I've lived in St. George since late 2007. In the Great Recession, like many people, we fell in hard times. I moved my family from the Phoenix Mesa area to the south of us, here to St. George, and started a couple of companies up here. And St. George has been a great place for us to raise our family. Our youngest one will be leaving home very shortly on an LDS mission to Ecuador. And I just feel like it's time that I step up and help pay back some of that benefit to the community where it's been so good for us. I'm a very pro-business candidate. I feel like as a business producer in our economy here, I too have spent a great deal of my time advertising the greatness of St. George throughout all the world. As a vacation home operator and property management company in real estate, I bring people from all over the world to experience St. George through our Huntsman Senior Games, through the marathon. I'm also serving on the Exchange Club leadership team. I'm the secretary of the Exchange Club, who originally started the St. George Marathon 26 years ago, roughly. And we do quite a bit of involvement in our community here. And bottom line is I really want to give back, and I want to serve our community here in St. George. Thank you,
Kendall. Appreciate that. Next up is Lane Rano.
Thank you, everybody, for allowing us to come into your home. They asked where I'm from. I'm from heaven. I'm down here checking up on all of you, and believe me, it's not going too well. Actually, I was born in Cedar City, Utah. Please don't hold that against me. Raised in Panaca, Nevada. Spent most of my adult life in Salt Lake City. I attended SUU when it was College of Southern Utah. I wasn't as old as back to Branch Normal School, but almost. University of Utah and the University of Utah Law School, and some certifications from UCLA in California, but don't hold that against me either. My forte is solving problems, managing things efficiently, and making them work better. And I'm just going to tell you about one thing. The last career job I had was in Porterville, California, fiscal manager for a small not-for-profit corporation. When they hired me there, they were overspending their budget. Now, this is a not-for-profit corporation. It's not a profit corporation. They had limited funds. They're overspending their budget by about $150,000 a month, at over $2 million in long-term debt, and it just went on and on from there. When I left 5 years later, or 10 years later, the budget had been doubled, there was no debt, and they had $5.5 million cash in the bank. You cannot beat a management situation like that. Now, the city council members are not to micromanage, but their responsibility is of oversight. And they need somebody there that has this type of experience, knowing what to do, how to do it, and then doing it. Thank you very much. LaneRano.com if you want to know more about me.
Lane, thank you. Eric Hovland, you're up next.
Hi, my name is Eric Hovland. I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I went to school at the University of Minnesota and studied architecture. Paid my way through school. I'm a violinist. To pay my way through school, I taught violin lessons, and that turned into a business opportunity with my family. We started Hovland Conservatory of Music. I was the executive director. And within 10 years, we had 7 locations in Minneapolis and in Phoenix, Arizona. And still today, it is one of the premier music schools for K through 9th grade violin and piano lessons. In the late 90s, I started a software development company called Hovland Information Design based in Minneapolis. We became one of the premier software development companies for, at that time, really cutting edge software using the then newfangled World Wide Web and using that to develop software, which ended up evolving into a lot of software for medical and rehabilitation work. So I worked with the VA in Minneapolis, did volunteer work with vets with disabilities, and this is prior to the iPhone, using smartphone technology so to keep these injured vets connected with their doctors. We also were the first company that developed a software interface that used the internet and MRI technology to play video games for stroke rehabilitation. And I had a medical company that went public that was a client of mine. I helped them go public out in New York. So I had a lot of experience developing that company as well and was quite successful. In 2008, via eHarmony, I met Jenny Larson, who lived here in St. George, and she and her mom had started Urban Renewal 15 years ago now. So we met, and that compelled me to move out here. So today, Jenny and I run the store, and I've done that since 2008. So today we run Urban Renewal in downtown St. George. It's a very popular store. We work with a lot of people. We see lots of people coming in from town that's stopping in, lots of tourists, lots of regular, lots of local folks that I have an opportunity to meet with and talk with, and have spent a lot of time talking about what everyone sees needs for St. George. So I want to take some of those ideas and also spearhead the protections of the historic district. That's really what compelled me to run, was last year realizing how much risk our historic district has for development. So I'd like the opportunity to meet with people and campaign and hopefully serve on the city council.
Great, Eric Hovland, thank you. Next up is Micheline Perez.
Micheline.
Micheline,
But it's okay.
there we go, Micheline, sorry about that. We even rehearsed
You don't
that.
have to get my name right to vote for me, so it works out just fine.
All right.
I grew up here. I know firsthand how the area is growing. I went to 6 different schools from K through 12 because of rezoning of districts. I got my bachelor's degree here at Dixie State College then. And then I went on to get my master's, and I've currently been teaching as an adjunct here at Dixie State University. I've been able to see how the area grows and how it affects so many demographics. For instance, how the university has grown doesn't only affect the students that go here, it affects our worldwide connection. We currently have students coming here, nursing students from Tanzania, and I think that just shows the appeal that St. George has on an international level. But I think the most important thing you can know about me is what sets me apart from the other candidates. You may be able to tell just at a glance, I'm definitely the youngest candidate. So that's a demographic that typically hasn't had representation in our government. And I understand why. It's like we're starting our families, we're trying to start our careers, we're finishing up school. But I think that that's vital to the growth of St. George, is representation of all demographics. And I feel extra strongly about that. You may have noticed my last name is Perez. My husband is Mexican and Navajo, so I have a strong connection to minority demographic in our community, which again, looking around, we're all real white here. And so that's something that needs to be represented. But I also feel really strongly about a couple of things that I think we're going to need as we expand. For one is a youth center. We currently don't have one. We have 3 senior centers in our county, which is wonderful, and I think we can devote those same resources and commitment to all of our demographics. Thank you.
Micheline, thank you. Betty Ariel, you're up next.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Betty Ariel, and I am from the Provo-Orem area. Grew up there with a heavy dose of pioneer ancestors from this area. And it took me moving here to realize just exactly how well connected I was. And even though our family chose to move here because of the great sports, the first, I think it was at Christmas, our sons went snowboarding at Bryan Head and water skiing or wakeboarding at Lake Mead on a Christmas day. It was unbelievable, and they were thrilled to death. But I have a huge, heavy dose of guilt with these ancestors because the more I studied, the more I learned about them. I have a great-great-grandmother who came here with an abundance of children and no water. We think we have to have water, but we do. We definitely do, but she didn't. She didn't have any clean water, and I don't know how she did it. But she died at 75, a week apart from her husband, and lived here. Of course, they did get water after a little while, so that was helpful. But I've learned a lot from them, and every time I do all the wonderful things and look at the sky and the beauty of this place, I feel a responsibility that I haven't paid my dues the way they did, and makes me very glad. I have an abundance of experience that I feel very grateful for. Some of it is actually serendipitous. I am lucky and have experience in a large corporation where I singly managed $1 million budget, and also worked for a land managing agency where I have experience with some of the challenges that we have with the Endangered Species Act and other land managing issues. Also, I have a degree in history and modern dance from Brigham Young University, and so I understand the arts issues that we have in town, and basically just absolutely love life and love this town, and have thoroughly enjoyed being part of the decision making and the guidance that has taken place.
Betty Ariel, thank you so much for joining us on this roundtable discussion. And our last candidate to speak to us this evening, Brian Theriot. Tell us about yourself.
I'd love to tell myself about you. My name is Brian Theriot, and St. George is my home. This is where I grew up. Dr. Staley, when he said to my wife, not my wife, my mother, it was 12 o'clock, he said to my mom, would you like your son to be born on the 4th or the 5th? Because I was born at 12 o'clock straight up. And she said, I want him to celebrate his birthday all day long here. And so March 5th was my birthday, right here in St. George. And at that time, St. George was a great and wonderful place. I'm the oldest of 6 boys. I came here to graduate from Dixie High School, came here to Dixie College at the time, chased my girlfriend, who eventually became my wife here, and then went to Weber State University, earned a degree in political science and communication, and then a graduate degree from the University of Utah. From there, I've worked for 2 U.S. senators, Senator Orrin Hatch and Bob Bennett. And so I spent 15 years working for the federal government, and my true passion is local government. And so what I really wanted to do is learn everything I could about the federal government so that I could get in and make a big impact and difference right here locally in local government here in St. George. Thank you.
Great, Brian, thank you for introducing yourself as well. If you're just joining us, this is the St. George City Council Candidate Roundtable coming to you live from Dixie State University through the auspices of the Community Education Channel. We're going to take a break and come back and talk about a few issues having to do with life here in St. George. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
There is a place where rocks bleed and nature blushes on a battlefield green with envy, where dimples determine destiny and a tiny wooden T holds the outcome in the balance. There is a place where friends are opponents and opponents are friends, where the prize is elusive, the conquest is captivating, and the score isn't settled till the drinks are down. There is a place.
Okay, so what would you bring to my company?
What do you need?
I need problem-solving skills.
I got through high school without a car, a phone, or a computer.
No college degree, though.
Not yet, but life's taught me a lot, and I'm ready for more.
Well, you're not the typical kind of candidate that I hire. But you are exactly what I'm looking for.
Your company could be missing out on the candidates it needs most. Learn how to find a great pool of untapped talent at gradsoflife.org.
There is a place where the sun doesn't hide in the winter, where the greens stay green and the crimson canyons still glow. There is a place where dimples determine destiny, and a tiny wooden tee holds the outcome in the balance. There is a place where we drive for show, putt for dough, and settle the score with another round. There is a place.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
Welcome back to the St. George City Council Roundtable. I'm your host, Eric Young, and we're conducting a bit of a discussion, and we'll eventually get into some policy issues, things that are important to us here in St. George, Utah. But first, I wanted to open up with a bit of a philosophical question, and that is, how do you, if you take this seat, if you're elected into this seat, as far as our City Council is concerned, how do you perceive the concept of shared governance? And what I mean by that is the flow of input from the citizens to the council and from the council into policy. And Brian Theory, let's start with you, if we could.
Sure. First of all, I'm not going to be a candidate or a city councilman who's going to be one that's always giving you rhetoric. If you're looking for representation, I will work hard and I will always be open. And I'd love to have your ideas and through that representation, implement them.
So when you talk about staying open, what do you mean by that? What kind of channels do you feel yourself using to be able to stay in touch with your constituents that way?
Well, at the city office, my cell phone, as accessible as possible is what I'd like to be.
All right. Okay, thank you. Betty, what do you think?
Well, I have always believed in the premise that we are a representative democracy. We elect people to represent us, and we elect people that we believe have a like mind in policy and theory, and so we allow them to represent us. But also, I love the input and the involvement. Our government cannot function without all of its citizens being part of the play. And we currently receive email, phone messages, personal contact on a definitely a daily basis. And I think yesterday there were thousands on my phone, thousands of messages. So I try to respond to every single one of them. And unless they're a form letter, which I just kind of respond in a form letter kind of way. But love to talk to people, want to hear their points of view, and then we definitely take those comments into consideration as we deliberate on what the city should happen with the city. There are many ways people can be involved. We have many committees that people can be part of. They can start them. We are happy to have people involved in a positive, upbuilding way with the city as it functions. And so I think that's the way I have worked in the past, and that's the way I would be in the future.
Thank you. Micheline, shared governance, what do you think? What's the idea?
I have to admit, I love this since it's one of my platforms is community collaboration. As of now, I know that the city does inform people. Oftentimes, I've checked the cork board where there's notices put up. But what's fantastic about the internet and social media is there are so many more ways to get the community involved and to get them information about what's available, more than is, I think, currently being used. Most of my campaigning, I'm using Facebook, I'm using Twitter, I have a website, and people can use that to respond back to you. And I believe that it's important to be available for both the positive and the negative feedback, because without that, you're not really getting the full picture. Something else that I think would be fantastic to implement here is, because everybody works, everybody's got lives, you can't come to every city council meeting, nor would you want to, because there's a lot of nitty-gritty work that goes into those meetings, and there's not cookies, so many people won't want to come. No free food, nobody comes. If you look at Salt Lake City and a lot of cities around the nation, they have community councils, or whatever you want to call them, where they are set up geographically. And so you wouldn't have to go to city council to voice your concerns. You could go to your, for instance, Dixie Downs area. They could go into their specific committee members, address their concerns, who would then be the official line to take things to city council, and vice versa. Where I think that would help, because right now our city council members are elected, and that's fantastic, but you notice that they tend to come from the same areas of town, whereas this would make sure that there is more equal geographic representation.
So if I'm understanding you, you're talking about developing representative committees for the separate communities within the St. George
region. Yeah,
area.
so that way every part of St. George has representation.
Okay.
And they could elect them and they could change them, however, they could set it up in each community how they want to do it and how they want to fulfill it. And obviously if a community doesn't have anybody who wants to do that, then they don't have to. But it would allow for a better flow of information from top to bottom and bottom to top.
I see. Thank you. Eric Hovland, you bring some corporate experience to this idea of shared governance. What do you have in mind here?
I think it's the key question, really. I think that, like Betty said, as elected officials, we'd be representing people, but you can't really be representing people if people aren't informed, and people don't have great access. My wife and I had personal experience with this last year when our building downtown is slated for demolition, and the school board, the city council, the Historic Preservation Commission had all looked at plans for the future downtown, and before that we were even informed. So there was already a consensus inside the city that wasn't public, already moving this forward before we were even we who were going to be most affected were informed about what was going on. So they didn't give us an opportunity to even be part of those conversations until it's way far through the process. So I think transparency is very, very important so that people know what's happening. And I think, like what Micheline's saying, the web would be a great way where things that are being discussed are pushed out there as fast and as readily as possible so people can be aware. At a recent city council meeting, there was a conversation about building a business in a residential area. And one of the council members said, well, there's no one from the residents here complaining about this, so they must be for it. Well, this was a more poor area that's really busy, and I can see it'd be very difficult for them to know about it and be aware of what's going on and or advocate against it, especially if it's happening quickly like it was happening with our building last summer. So I think even reaching out, the city council, as a city council member, I would want to reach out and go there and say, hey, what do you guys think of this idea before we agree to it? So I think being open, being available, but also making sure we're getting a lot of information out there so people can form opinions and seek those opinions before the city council makes a decision. And the lack of pushback doesn't mean their support.
So when you say go there, are you talking about actually knocking on doors?
I think one of the things you find in the city, one of the things I studied when I studied architecture, if you look at the state highway system, it overlaps the old Indian trails. So where that Indian decided to walk, the Native American decided to walk through the valley is the way that our interstate ended up going. So it becomes really important as you're deciding what to do. That's going to be reinforced. So you put a building in, you put a business in the middle of a neighborhood, you're affecting change that's very hard to change. So it's really important that we're making these good decisions, and we're going to make good decisions by getting lots of input. So absolutely, if we're making a key decision about a neighborhood, I don't have any problem knocking on doors and saying, hey, we're about to decide on this. If you have an issue, tell me, I'll bring it to the council, or come. and making sure that we're really careful about our decision making and including as many people as possible, because that's how we're going to make the best decisions. And so that we don't make a mistake that's really hard to undo, like the Main Street Plaza downtown, 4.5-story building in the middle of our downtown. That's never going to get torn down. It's there forever. We're going to have to deal with it forever, even though it's dragging down the charm of the downtown. So that's where I think you have to be really careful as a council member as to what you're agreeing to.
Thanks, Eric. Lane, shared governance, what do you think?
Well, I don't believe in governance by committee. It's just passing the buck. I believe in communication, transparency, and getting the job done, and doing it efficiently, and making sure that the primary persons, whatever, that we're thinking about are the people, the taxpayers, the voters, the people that live here. Make it better for them. That's my philosophy on that.
All right, Lane Rano, thank you. Mr. Clements, what do you think?
Well, I've got lots of thoughts, but I'll try and put them in concise language here for us tonight. When I look at shared governance, I share some of the thoughts that Lane does. Is governance by committee, when you get to a certain population size, becomes inefficient. And when you talk about shared governance, that means that those who are governed by those who govern, there's responsibilities on both sides of that equation. And so when I go to a city council meeting, there's 5 people in the room that are not city council members. 3 of them are city employees there to do a report. I look and say, well, the citizenry isn't doing their share of governance on there. I think the city does a great job in notification through the websites, and they do the best they can in posting. I do like the idea that Eric commented on going out to the neighborhood, especially when it affects a neighborhood. I think that's good to get input like that. As a business person, the city requires me to send notification. If I'm going to have an impact on the community, I have to send notification out 300 to 500 linear or radial feet from a property, and I have to give that notification well in advance of my intentions. I think it's reasonable that a city should also do that if they have an impact into a community. But the population or the community itself has a responsibility to be actively involved. The website is as interactive as you can make it. It's always going under changes. I love our current day technology of Facebook. I'm not a big fan of Twitter yet. I haven't figured out how to follow that just yet. I'm not a hashtag person. But Facebook, I've mastered that, and I think there's good ways of getting information out there. And I think the better information we get out there, and if a person is interested or concerned about that, they have an opportunity and, in my opinion, a right as a citizen of our country and our community to show up and be part of that solution.
Okay, thanks, Kendall. Greg MacArthur, what do you think? Shared governance.
Sure. Well, I think it's important. First thing I'd like to say is I think the City of St. George has done a good job when people reach out to the City of St. George and the government there currently. The City of St. George has done a good job of listening when people reach out to them. And I would like to continue with that for sure. Just to give a quick example, I worked as the marketing manager for the Venetian and Palazzo hotels down in Las Vegas. We had a sign ordinance issue once. We had a billboard that was being pulled down. We didn't think it was right. And so I was trying to contact the city in Las Vegas, and it was impossible. And I had a big title. I thought I was working for a big company, and I couldn't get in. There's just nothing I could do. I kept getting blocked. Currently with the St. George Chamber of Commerce, I've had small businesses have sign ordinances, and they've talked to me because they're members of the Chamber of Commerce. And within 24 hours, I've been let in to the city offices with members of the city council and planning people, and they've helped me take care of those ordinances. So the city has done a good job when people reach out to them, in my opinion. And I'd like
Did you have to sing a Dixie song to do that?
I've been known to sing the song, but so I think the city has done a good job, and I plan on continuing to do with that. If I was elected as a city council member, I would like to make this a big part of my life. So it wouldn't just be something that I go to on Thursday night city council meeting and just voice my opinion because of my past experience. I plan on enveloping and taking this position and making it be a big part of my life. I'll make myself available through phone, email, at my office. This will be a big part of my life. And I'll use the experience that I have. I have a marketing degree, and I've been very involved with communicating information about the city and community things through the Chamber of Commerce to over 2,500 people, and I know that with all the noise and marketing and communication out there, you got to do specific things to have people listen. And so I'll use the skills that I have in that area to make sure that I get the message out correctly, and I plan on communicating the things that I do. So.
Great. Greg MacArthur, thank you. You're watching the St. George City Council Candidate Roundtable. We're going to go to break, but before I do, and the candidates don't know about this, I'm going to toss it out to them. We talked a little bit about issues before we went live. I want to go around the table very quickly. Greg, I'll start with you, and we'll go around. What do you think is the number one issue, the top issue that we're facing as citizens of St. George? Greg, go, and then we'll work around. One word.
Just one word.
Yeah.
Water.
Water.
Growth.
Growth.
Management.
Management.
One word. Growth.
Growth as well. Okay. Micheline.
Communication.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. Betty.
This is hyphenated. Keeping up.
Keeping up.
Keeping up.
Keeping current, keeping up to
Keeping
date.
up with the great things that have already happened in this town.
Okay, all right. Brian?
Water.
Water. Wow, well, that kind of sets the stage for what it is we'll be talking about. We're going to take a couple of minute break and we'll be right back. Thanks for joining us.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
There is a place where the desert comes alive, where rain breaks forth from solid stone and gardens spring from blistered rock. There is a place with enough color to make a rainbow jealous, where boulders are bigger than buildings and cliffs are higher than clouds. There is a place that will straighten your step, tighten your grip, widen your eyes, and open your jaw. There is a place.
The Community Education Channel, serving Washington County for 20 years, covering DSU athletics, local high school events, city councils, the Economic Summit, Chamber of Commerce meetings, community events like Washington City Veterans Day celebration, and much more. Visit cectvutah.com for broadcast schedule and more information.
Welcome back to the studios of the Community Education Channel, coming to you live from the campus of Dixie State University. My name is Eric Young, and we're conducting a St. George City Council Candidate Roundtable, and we have our candidates here, and we've talked about perhaps what their priority is as far as what they see are the pressing concerns for the city of St. George. A couple of them kind of tie together, and that deals with water and growth. Okay, so I'm going to put those two together and ask you what's your position, what's your perspective, what's your frame of reference on these two conditions as far as St. George City growth in terms of not only residential development but also in bringing in business and industry, and if that's the case, how do we handle the water issue or perhaps any other infrastructure issues that we deal with. I'm going to start right in the middle of the table, okay? Eric, let me start with you, and then I'll keep you all on your toes and pick on whoever's next instead of going around. So, Eric Hovland, what do you think?
What's the question?
The question,
Sorry.
So we're talking about growth,
Yes.
and that's going to be related to water. So
Yes.
in terms of growth management, to dovetail Lane Rano's idea into this as well, what's your position? What's your philosophy as far as developing not only residential, but also in terms of business development, and how do we manage infrastructure to match that kind of growth?
Well, I think
That's a big question.
I think it's a big question. I think that's what the city council is going to be grappling with a lot. I think there's a lot of, obviously we have a lot of growth.
We've been grappling with that for years, for
Yes.
decades. How can we grapple a little bit better? do you think? What can we do differently, perhaps, that goes against the status quo of grappling?
Sorry, but all right. So
You're
as
on
far
the
as
spot.
yes, so as far as we have a couple mentioned water. We have the water pipeline. That's a big issue, I think. And
You're talking about the Lake Powell pipeline.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. I think that's a good idea. I think that it's when my wife and I were looking for property a number of years back, we were looking in a remote area, and my father-in-law asked one question. He says, "Does it have water?" He says, "If you don't have water, you don't got nothing." And I think that's a pretty pressing issue. Where if we handle that wrongly at this point, we're going to be really in a bind and have very forced rationing of water going forward. So I think that it's a resource that we should make sure that we're availing ourselves of and preparing for that growth. As far as one of the things that I think is a key is that the city council manages is the zoning. And how do we control that in a way that it gets the city that we want?
So you're talking about residential and commercial zoning and how they come together.
That's right. I think a lot of times, if you take it on a case-by-case basis, you get in real trouble.
Okay.
Because it depends on who's. If you have a powerful person or a special person or a very interesting project, you can get really confused on that. What do we do with that particular project? I think if you stand back and we're being more neutral and more fair by saying these are the zoning ideas and have that zoning be very, very specific. I think that's a real key issue in the downtown. I think that we've left the chicken coop gate open for the foxes downtown. There is no special zoning in our historic district. So if a developer wants to build a multi-story building right in the middle of our historic district, there's nothing stopping them from doing that, other than the Historic Preservation Commission. But they could get, they have a nice, exciting project. They could really, all you need is a few people to let that through, and there's no stopping it. So we could have a multi-story structure right behind the Brigham Young House, and it's not even to go through the city council and have the city council a chance to say, wait a second, that's not growth we want.
So are you talking referendum? You're talking a city council ordinance?
If you look at historic, not to focus too much on the historic district, but it's an issue that's really key and what spurred me to run, if you look at historic districts around the Southwest, we're the only historic district that's been successful. And any successful historic district you look at, there's very, very particular zoning. It's how many stories you can go. There's setbacks. There's step backs. As you go higher, you got to step back. And there's a maximum square footage of that building based upon the lot you have, which ends up forcing a charming, quaint area of town. Our historic district has none of that. Instead of that, we've gone the route of having a Historic Preservation Commission. However, on our Historic Preservation Commission are developers and architects who have a very big incentive to say, oh, let's go big, let's go broad. And then I think the city council isn't in a hurry to shut that gate because there's the lure of property taxes. So I think that should be closed very tightly and say, this is exactly the development we need. This is the exact what we want to see. And then you can open the floodgates and say, your developers develop. Because we are comfortable that what we're going to get is what we want to see as a community. And that should be the model throughout the community, really clearly zoning things and getting the look of the city that we want and letting people be free within that zoning parameter.
You brought up the T word, tax, property tax. Could property tax become perhaps an incentive for preservation of historical properties?
I don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
I don't think that's necessary. I think that if you're protecting it and it becomes like, let's say, the downtown, I don't think you have to do anything to persuade people to build and develop businesses downtown. I think that if you step back, you do good zoning, and a lot of the property downtown is owned by the city. The city doesn't want to sell it because they want to develop it. They want to see the way it's going to get developed, where they'd be able to freely step back, let it get developed if there's really clear zoning. Our downtown is not vibrant because the city council isn't stepping away from it and letting developers who would be excited to have restaurants and shops, and we'd have that charming, vibrant downtown we all want. The city just has to get out of the way. I don't see them having to beg people through property tax to make this happen. I think if the city stepped back with clear rules so that we don't all of a sudden get a high-rise another high-rise right in the middle of the city, with clear rules, we could step back and say, developers, go do it. Go do your thing. And we're a growing city that gives a lot of opportunity for that. There's plenty of people that are in town that would see that as a great opportunity for a business.
Betty, Ariel, you talked about water and your ancestors not having any good, clean drinking water. So what do you propose here in managing that along with the growth of this area?
Well, my comment that I thought the biggest challenge was keeping up with what has been done. Interestingly enough, I believe the Penny's building was a vacant lot until, it isn't really historic, but I do believe that the historic preservation that's taken place, particularly under the the mayorships of Mayor Brooks and Mayor MacArthur, has been outstanding, and they've done so much to do that. And I know that the city values the historic nature. But to the water, we have. In 1980, when we moved here, we recognized and heard a lot about the water sources that we have, the aquifers. They were right in the beginning of developing Quail Creek and later Sand Hollow and Gunlock, some of the other reservoirs, and we watched that controversy. We heard people step up and say they didn't want them, that it was too much money and they didn't want their tax dollars going to those.
We even had a failure of the quail.
Well, we did, and it was in my neighborhood. It was very exciting, by the way. But anyway, so, there's really not a lot new when it comes to how people feel about things, especially when it has to do with their pocketbook. But the magic of our city is that we have taken our sewage, raw and nasty as you can imagine, and have, through natural processes, have recycled or reconstituted that sewage into clean, drinkable water, 98% something pure, clean water.
Where's that water going?
The water right now is watering our golf courses and our parks. We have a park within half a mile of each of our.
Well, depending on traffic.
That's right. Oh, come on. Of our communities. And we value that green, the green that keeps our air purified, that cools us, it cools the earth. It makes this town different from Las Vegas and other cities. But our water could be used, and actually is going, to answer your question, right into the Virgin, and is drinking water in Mesquite and Los Angeles.
Yeah, I was leading you with that question.
Yeah, you were.
As it were.
So I just bring that up to the fact that there are always new things we can do. And I don't take that doomsday view that there isn't hope, and that we can have water, we can have drinking water. I do support the Lake Powell pipeline because I believe it will happen, and similar to those reservoirs that no one wanted, it will probably happen. But
so you're equating the success of these drinking water reservoirs, as far as Quail and Sand Hollow are concerned, to the implementation of a pipeline from Lake Powell?
Well, you can't. It's not an equal money. I know the funding is different, but yes, it's the attitude. There are people who will block everything, and there are people who will thoughtfully think about it, and then there are those people who will do it and who will reach out and really step out ahead. And I know the respect with which our Washington County Water Conservancy District is held throughout the state of Utah. Other leaders and other water managers look to them for advice, and I hear and see that at the Utah League of Cities and Towns and the Utah Association of Counties. They are held in great respect. We should watch them. We should be careful of what they do. We should always be careful with our tax dollars and when we're spending money, but sometimes we need leadership that's forward-looking and that can step out and do the things just like our sewer plant.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Well, I have 2 votes so far for the Lake Powell pipeline. Kendall, I'm going to go to you next here as we talk about this issue of water. I haven't heard the C word yet until she brought it up in the name of an institution here as far as Water Conservancy is concerned. Is that an idea?
Well, conservancy is an individual approach, and I think there's always more that we can do in conservation ideas. And a lot of us have gone to more of a xeriscape or a desertscape landscaping mindset, and that does save a tremendous amount of water if you look at water usage in residential areas. I know the city gets some grief sometimes because they have invested quite a bit into parks and green belt areas. But Betty has mentioned, how we're reclaiming that water to use back for that. And I think that's a good thing in our community to do because it's getting double use out of the single resource. I think it's a good approach.
How do we keep it from dumping into the Virgin River, though? What needs to happen there?
Well, I'm not sure you can keep it from dumping into the Virgin River.
Well, I mean, after it's treated, obviously there's some control there as to where it's going.
Yeah. I'm not sure how to answer that, of how to keep it from going into that direction. But I am going to add another vote to the pipeline concept with a small twist to it, because I know there's a large price tag to that model, and something needs to happen. I believe it is going to happen. But one of the things I'd like to put my 2 cents in on as a policy maker in a city is, why would we want to pay billions of dollars to bring a pipe from Lake Powell all the way over to St. George? Wouldn't it be less expensive to let the water run natural down through the rivers into Lake Mead and then pump it back up a shorter distance? And so I just want to make sure that question gets asked before we put billions of dollars in.
So a little out of the pipeline thinking.
Yeah,
there.
Instead of the 192 miles of pipeline work and the many lifts that it'll take to get it there, versus a shorter distance of, say, 40 miles. I'm from Idaho, not a mathematician, but 40 is less than 192 or whatever it is. So that's how it works in my book anyhow.
I'm going to interject. I think the problem with that is we have 2 different basins. We have the upper river basin and the lower basin. And Utah's allocation is up in the upper basin.
So that's outside of the
but if
allocation.
Down there is no longer ours.
Yeah, it's no longer ours.
Once it crosses that
I think agreements can always be reached when you look at economics and whatnot. When I was living in Arizona, we produced an awful lot of power for the state of California, and they had agreements going back and forth. So I think it can be reached. And to me, a negotiation across the table is a lot less expensive than several billions of dollars for that large of a pipeline. Now, that being said, that may have already been looked at, and they've looked at it and said it's not.
The bureaucracy of that transcends what happens on a local level as far as St. George City is
concerned. It does.
Goes to the state, goes to the state of Nevada, state of Arizona.
Absolutely. And as a city representative, I just want to make sure we've at least asked and exhausted that question, because it's our tax dollars, and it's not just this little community here, which is growing rapidly. It's many communities all around us. And I'll tell you, along that pipeline, I can envision different people tapping into it at certain points in time. And how does that impact us if we're the people that put all the money into it and other people get the benefit of it? Is there some recourse that we can recoup those tax dollars? Because it is expensive, but it's a topic that I think is very valid, and I appreciate Brian's input because it helps me understand some of the thoughts and aspects out there.
No, good, Brian. So we got some momentum going your way. What do you think?
I've got to interject.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Looking into a reservoir to keep that. I just don't have time to tell you all the things.
That's the third reservoir out at.
No, with our recycled water.
Oh, with the recycled waters.
So would this be coming out of the water treatment facility?
Into a storage facility.
Into a secondary storage?
Correct.
Okay.
Before we jump over to Brian,
sure.
Is part of your question also about energy production?
No, but that's a great idea.
I'll hold that then.
Okay.
I'll hold that till later.
I also wanted to get into the carotid artery of Bluff Street as well, if we have some time to go in that direction. Brian, growth, water management?
The second largest city in the state of Utah is West Valley City. And West Valley City would not be a city if it were not for the Central Utah Water Project. The state of Utah is already pumping water from the Colorado River into West Valley. So that precedent's already been set. And there's still unallocated water for Utah, and that's what we'd be going after. And I would support doing everything I could to bring the Lake Powell pipeline over to St.
So
George.
a functioning model exists.
Yes.
You're able to gather data on that, examine the pros and cons, and then make that application to the model of St. George and their usage here.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Micheline?
I'm so glad you keep bringing me back to my platforms, because number 2 is sustainable growth. People tend to forget we live in a desert, and without water we're going to die. And too many people are like, we don't have a problem here yet. I'm like, no, there's a problem. Look, they're already doing water restrictions. And to be honest, I want to see a gray water system, which, as Betty mentioned, we kind of have, we take the sewer water, but the gray water system would also take water from sinks and from bathtubs and things like that, and we'd be able to reuse it in toilets and filter it in water lawns and things like that. Because currently most of St. George waters their lawn with culinary water. So I think before we bring in a pipeline, let's use what we have more efficiently. And I think part of that will be addressing the aesthetic that St. George has set up for itself. For instance,
You mean the green on red?
no, well, the green on red, but also the palm trees.
Oh, okay, right.
Because a palm tree can take up to 1,000 liters of water a day and have been documented to add to the heat around them. So where we're all like green and hide in the shade because it's ridiculously hot outside, those trees aren't helping.
I don't know. We're not going to get rid of that image of Utah's Palm Springs.
LA is though, and if LA can do that, we can.
Okay.
LA is currently pulling out their palm trees because they can't afford the water for them. So let's be proactive and really look at what we're putting into our environment around us and our aesthetic, and choose plants that complement that while also take less water. For instance, I'm a big fan of AstroTurf. It gives that, those tiny little stretches of grass that make no sense and no one sits there. AstroTurf it. Let's not spend our water on that. Because that's the thing, we need growth that is sustainable, that we can live with in the long term. And that goes into water usage and it goes into business, okay? Because we need to have an investment in businesses that are long term. So for instance, we have housing developments popping up like crazy, and most of those are being bought by people who don't live here. They're retiring here, they're coming here because they love the area, and that's great. But that's adding to metropolitan sprawl, because if you look at the U.S. Census, St. George is the 5th highest rate of growth in the United States for metro growth, and we need to take that into account. So I'm talking about mixed-use residential. So the bottom floors are businesses and the top floors are affordable housing, which is something we desperately need in this area. There's currently dozens of scams going on in our area, taking advantage of people who are working 2 jobs and still can't make it. And they're trying to get into low-income housing so that they can survive. And so we need more opportunities and more housing that's available. And one of the great things about mixed-use residential is it cuts down on your need for a car. Because as our current city is set up, if I want to go to the grocery store, I have to get in the car and drive a couple miles, which is fine. But the thing is like, I have a car. What about the people who can't afford it? And with the SunTran only currently running 6 days a week, how are those people supposed to get to work? How are people supposed to get to the store and take care of their families if they work 6 days a week between their 2 or 3 jobs? Which I understand, because I've had 2 to 3 jobs consistently for the last 6 years. We have to be able to grow in a way that takes care of all of our citizens, not just the ones with the most opportunities.
Thank you. Some interesting ideas there. Great. You spoke about your experience with the Venetian.
Yeah.
And what's sustainable about that? What can you bring here as far as maybe that frame of reference in working with sustainable growth in St. George? Or is that even something we need to consider?
Well, that's an interesting question, the way you phrased that. Well, my experience at the Venetian, I was the marketing manager there, so I have a degree and a lot of experience in marketing. And one way that I'd like to use that experience when it comes to growth and water and those type of things, one example is I sit on a group, it's a group of citizens of the community that get together once a month and they go to the Water Conservancy District. It's the, the Water Conservation Committee, and what they do is they get together and they tell us and ask our opinions on the things that they're doing to conserve water here in southern Utah. And the one thing that I'm always talking about in that group, and I get very vocal in it, is you guys are doing a lot of things for water conservancy here. There's a lot of great programs going on, but the people don't know. The people don't know what's going on. So you need to communicate that better so people can be aware and take advantage of these programs. So I think that's one thing that I could do as a council member and just in the city is use my communication skills and marketing skills to get the information out a little bit better than it's been getting out currently.
Pipeline, yay or nay?
I am for the Lake Powell pipeline. Okay. Now, cost has to be taken into consideration there. Sure. It's not all cost, let's just do the pipeline. It's, let's make sure that the costs are correct as well. One thing is, we gotta see what's so great about St. George. Why does everybody want to come here? The quality of life is high. I was born and raised here, and I took it for granted until I finally moved out and then saw what other cities are like, and I got back as quick as I could because it is amazing here. And that's one thing that I want to sustain here. And that goes into zoning, planning, water, bringing in new businesses and things. One thing that I really want to make sure that we do is make sure that we keep our quality of life high here. Make sure that we identify the things that make us so great and make sure that we make policies and decisions that make sure that we can continue that way. So having a good source of water far into the future is one of those things that I want to make sure that we have.
Micheline, we didn't quite articulate your position, but I guess we can guess at it as far as a pipeline is concerned. No pipeline.
Well, not as a first option.
Not as a first option. First, instead, we need to look at it.
Of course, there's always a mosaic when it comes to a community decision, a mosaic of an answer, but.
Which is going to take a lot of management, Lane.
Way to go, management.
How was that for a segue?
It's like prompted.
I like to talk about great American philosophers and great American politicians. And one of my favorites was a great American politician who was asked one day how he felt about one of the points in the campaign. And he very wisely said, some people are for it, some people are against it, and I'm for the people. Now that may sound facetious and stupid and overly simplified.
And a safe response.
What?
And a safe response.
Well, I'm getting to the point. If we consider the people first, what's best for the people, and how we can best serve them, those questions will be answered. Now, I walk every morning for 2 miles. It takes me 30 minutes. I'm going to enter the senior games in the 45 to 48 age group. Why are you laughing? And I'm going to win. But I walk past water running down the gutters. Drives me nuts. Now, I'm not only a conservationist, I'm a problem solver, a builder, and a solution finder. I don't know where that water's going. There are thousands of gallons going down those gutters. Where's it going? To Mesquite? The Virgin River? Who knows?
Brian might know.
Some of that water where you live, over on 700 South, there's actually underground wells. And so it's pumping your water so that your homes don't fill up. And so that's some
water.
water.
Why are they still filling up?
And then there's, I don't know, but that's one reason.
Where's the water going is the question.
It's going down to wherever the city collects it, over by the schools. So if you were to go by the schools, you'd see these ponds
Dixie
out,
Middle
these
School,
retention
that area
ponds.
down through there?
Plus, you also have irrigating rights where there's some citizens that still have water that's coming down.
They still put out the...
When we
They
moved here, we
divert
saw
it.
that water coming
So, yeah.
down Main Street and thought the same thing.
Yeah.
In fact, we called the city and said, this is totally irresponsible. We're in a desert and we shouldn't let this water just run. And it was from the wells and the seeps that are right above our home. We're in a very different part of the city than any of the other council members. And we see that water coming in. The water work or waterway, what do they call it, that comes right down in front of the black store there on Main Street.
Right on Main Street.
That water comes right down, and we have utilized it, Mayor MacArthur's dream there to use it at Town Square.
Right.
And all of our thousands of little children play in it. So, yeah, it's quite an amazing phenomenon.
And some adults as well.
Yes.
Lane, have we given you ample opportunity to finish up there?
No.
We kind of diverted, so let me come back to you.
Well, that's okay. Me and Rodney Dangerfield, we don't get no respect. I'm sure that somewhere it's used appropriately, but I don't like it when I see it running, the grates are blocked up and it's running out in the middle of the street. And I see sprinklers running, 1.5 inches of water in the street. And this is just in my neighborhood. I'm glad they're pumping it out from my foundation so it doesn't, this is actually uphill from my foundation. So another question I have is the sewer. I go around here and there are sewer manhole lids that there's a terrible stink coming out of it over in the Costco parking lot. You've all been there, you've all smelled that stink. What's going on? So I've had enough say, but management, efficiency, transparency, And communication is the key to everything if it's done correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Lane. You're watching the St. George City Council Candidate Roundtable, coming to you live on the Community Education Channel from the campus of Dixie State University. We're at the top of the hour. We'll take a little break, and when we come back, there are two more issues here that I want to talk about. One being Bluff Street, that blocked artery of Bluff Street here in St. George. And secondly, as we initiated here, what about this Airbnb business, this temporary idea as far as temporary rentals are concerned? So two issues when we come back. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Thanks for joining us.
There is a place where young and old make connections, where kids feel like grown-ups, and grown-ups feel like kids. There is a place where beauty arises in contrast, where wonder is universal, and laughter second nature. There is a place where friends find a future, families find each other, and feelings find their home. There is a place. There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place. There is a place where rocks bleed and nature blushes on a battlefield green with envy, where dimples determine destiny and a tiny wooden T holds the outcome in the balance. There is a place where friends are opponents and opponents are friends, where the prize is elusive, the conquest is captivating, and the score isn't settled till the drinks are down. There is a place.
Okay, so what would you bring to my company?
What do you need?
I need problem-solving skills.
I got through high school without a car, a phone, or a computer.
No college degree, though.
Not yet, but life's taught me a lot, and I'm ready for more.
Well, you're not the typical kind of candidate that I hire. But you are exactly what I'm looking for.
Your company could be missing out on the candidates it needs most. Learn how to find a great pool of untapped talent at gradsoflife.org.
Welcome back to the St. George City Council Roundtable discussion. We have our 2015 candidates around the table here, and we're talking about issues dealing with St. George, our fair city. And as I said in the toss going before break, what about the issue of Bluff Street? This comes back to some city council decisions that have been made. I'm curious about where you might stand on that. One of the main issues as far as navigating St. George is getting from St. George Boulevard to Sunset without taking your life in your own hands. And there's been plenty of ideas proffered out there, and I'm not sure actually really where we stand, because it never really became a referendum issue as far as I understand in dealing with that. How do you see that as an issue, and what would you maybe advise as to how to go through and take care of the amount of congestion that happens in there without impacting local business? Greg, I'll start with you and I'll work around the table.
Sure thing.
Okay.
So that issue there on Bluff Street is a state road. And so we have to, what this comes down to is dealing with the Utah Department of Transportation.
Right.
Now there's been a good communication between the City of St. George and the Department of Transportation. And we need to keep that up. There was the Sunset and Bluff intersection there, that there was some particular issues going on there, the way they were going to run the road, flyover and things like that. And it was going to go forward, but because of the good relationship between the city and the Utah Department of Transportation, they've now stepped back to look at that. Now, it hasn't been decided exactly what's going to be, but they're not just going to instantly go ahead with that. So I think the main thing there is to keep communication open, because this does go to a state level.
Business owners were complaining that they were notified on any kind of easement encroachment or what might be happening there. It might be a great time to pull in that whole communication idea.
Correct, definitely so.
Kendall, what do you think?
You know, I don't think you're going to be able to do anything without impacting the business in some aspect. So the idea is to minimize it, and I think that communication is going to be key there. But you know, we as a community need to be supportive of those businesses the best we can, because it's a narrow piece of land that you have to deal with.
Landlocked,
You know.
we can't widen that without impacting businesses.
Yeah, a friend of mine is a chiropractor right there by Neaters, and they know that if and when, it's not a matter of if, it's more of when that project ever takes place, it is going to impact them there. And so I think we need some forward thinking in that. I really hope to have good communication out there as a community, but in particular to those businesses. But something definitely has to happen, and I think there's other ways to maybe look at different diversions of that road and, you know, away from that intersection, but it'll still impact businesses, unfortunately.
Okay. Lane, any ideas there?
Well, half the cars I see on the road in St. George have Nevada license plates. Down at the border, we just put a sign that says no Nevada people allowed, and that'd cut the traffic in half. Now, lived in Nevada, so I'm kidding. I hope you understand that. But the key to anything...
You never know when people are tuning in.
It's nobody from Panaca.
You know what I'm saying?
Panaca is the center of the unknown world.
The unknown universe, I understand.
Get this all the time. Analyze efficiency, management, and it's a disaster over there. It's going to take some really heavy thinking, some really analytical solutions, and I don't know what the answer is, but I'd like to be there to help find out.
Okay. Eric?
I'm with Lane. I don't know the answer, but I have a strong background. My software development company is a lot of math, a lot of programming, and it was medical related. It was very complex work, but that work required a lot of imagination. And how do we take this technology, how do we take these complex things and apply them in a way where mentally handicapped and stroke patients can be successful with that. So I spearheaded that. That was my company. So I could see being a really good voice on the council for the two things. One is oversight. So making sure that when a plan comes through, I'm not just at the council saying yes or no based upon what I heard in a presentation, but being in those meetings. Because like I discussed before, what we do has a lot of consequences for the future. And how we plan that road it's going to be very hard to undo. So we want to, as a city council, we need to make sure that we're making very, very good decisions, but combined with a lot of communication. My wife and I's business was blindsided by plans of the city that were done all at city level, not talking to people. They came to us at the last minute, which was what they told us at the time, 45 days from funding. So they're ready to go. They're moving full speed ahead, and then we find out. And then to stop it, we were, A-frames out on the street and making a big fuss because we didn't want to do that, but we had to because there was a railroad car coming. So we would want to make sure that we're doing the same thing with those businesses that have invested in that corridor and making sure that they're very well aware of what's happening so that we can get their feedback and or they can make appropriate planning for their businesses.
Micheline, what do you bring to the table as far as this issue goes?
I see that intersection as a symptom of the bigger problem.
Sunset Boulevard? Both those intersections as far as
both the
goes?
intersections.
Okay.
It's a symptom of the overall transportation needs that we need to look at as a city. Because as I said before, if you look at the U.S. Census, we are the 5th fastest growing metro area, not in Utah, in the United States. And our public transportation options are nil. And I think that if we had more of those, that would cut down on some of that traffic issues. Like I said, metropolitan sprawl adds to the fact that everybody needs to drive everywhere. But it is, obviously there's no one easy answer, but it's about looking for the longest reaching answer, looking as far as we can into the future and planning and realizing that it's not just about this one intersection. It's about transportation in general in our community.
Well, the Dixie Drive initiative certainly relieved a little bit of the congestion going through there in that respect, as far as getting away from those, just the intersection ideas. Betty, did I steal your thunder with that?
No,
okay.
No, that's great. That when we moved here in 1980, there were 20,000 people.
That's when I came
30,000. Yep.
Yep.
And River Road was non-existent.
Right.
Dixie Drive was non-existent. Right. The roads going above Bluff to the west, and the city master planned. They have had master plans. They adapt and review those master plans. We've had one. We do have one, and we are a partner with the state, as Greg said. We have transportation people who are bringing money in to the city to do these roads. They're very, very expensive. And we have a metropolitan planning organization. We have 3 city council representatives, 2 with the mayor on the committee, and they are looking into the future. They are looking at funding and the problems that brings. We're looking at a southern corridor, a northern corridor, a connection between Mall Drive and Red Cliffs Drive. We're looking at so many things, and very bright, great people are doing this, and they're not doing it in a vacuum. They've been holding public outreach events at the Dixie Center now for several years, but this year the attendance was triple what has been in the past. We had mothers pushing their strollers and retirees and everyone looking at large maps all around the room that showed where we need to build new roads, where we can better use older roads, all of our trail system, which is just phenomenal, and our ways of getting around. So the public is engaging in this issue, and certainly the Metropolitan Planning Organization is desirous of having everyone's input, and will continue with this transportation plan.
Thanks, Betty. Brian?
Yeah, when you're the last one, you just kind of do cleanup, I
Right.
guess, but we'll do it.
Well, you have both a disadvantage and an advantage in doing that.
All right, which is good. When I was in Senator Bennett's office, what was it, 5-6 years ago, we had worked directly on legislation for the Washington County Growth and Conservation Act. And in that act included a northern corridor to help relieve that pressure on Sunset, Bluff, and Boulevard. And I think that's something that I could really get in and get behind and see that it's implemented.
Okay. All right, well, let's switch to a bit more of a hot topic, a hot button when it comes to this idea of short-term, or what's been called vacation rentals here in St. George. Through the graces of social media, we have lots of little pop-up enterprises, not one so little, called Airbnb, that goes through and allows a homeowner to basically create a spot within their domicile, and they can put that online and open that up for rent without any kind of oversight, without any kind of business license, nothing. In fact, Airbnb takes the responsibility and the insurance, in fact, to go through and make sure that both the homeowner and the person who ends up renting there, they have their interests insured, and their best interests are at hand that way. And now we're talking about maybe taking away that privilege, either through some type of St. George City policy or through referendum. What do you think? How do you feel about that? And Brian, I'll start with you, and I'll work our way back around this way.
Vacation rental by owner. You just live in St. George, and everybody outside of St. George, they always want to come to your home. And I didn't realize it's really not a vacation when you're living here.
Right. Yeah.
Having everybody come and visiting, right? But in all seriousness, cities and counties and states must and have to regulate health, safety, and welfare. And I think you can allow it to happen, but it has to be regulated.
Isn't
Absolutely.
this the free market model working well in that respect? As far
I mean, would I want my whole block converted into vacation rental by owner? I don't think so. I think it needs to be interspersed.
Okay. Some interspersed meaning it's controlled on some level? It's
some kind of controls.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would those be?
2 per block? I don't know. I mean,
Is
who
a
knows?
lottery system kind of a thing?
Who knows? You know, that's where I'd like to get more feedback
Okay.
and input on it. I really don't have a dog in this fight.
Okay.
But if I had 20 of them show up in my neighborhood, that'd be pretty hard.
Right. Betty, what do you think?
Yes, this is a very interesting issue. It's probably one of our biggest issues because it kind of came out of nowhere. Basically, we have ordinances. We have zoning, our zoning, single residential zoning. We have vacation rental zoning. There's several different areas, I could name them, but where you could do that very thing. But somehow there was this underground that's just been going like this. I mean, I hadn't ever heard of Airbnb.
Yeah, it's been established for at least 5 or 6 years, especially in our area.
Just hadn't, and I have to admit that I have rented homes and enjoyed that in other places too. But But we have a rule, and it is actually against our ordinance. So it's against our rule, and mainly because it's that tension between private property rights, which I'm very supportive of. Where you buy property, you have a certain expectation, and there's a certain zoning that protects that expectation. And then there's the side where, well, this is my home. I have purchased it, then I could do what I want in it. But again, it's the overriding zoning and the code that would kind of direct. I don't know what we'll come up with. We're getting tremendous feedback and interest. We're listening to both sides, and there's sympathies with both sides. There definitely is. But like I say, there are rules. And if you are conducting this kind of a business under the radar, so to speak, you're not paying property tax, you're not paying transient room tax, you're not adhering to parking rules. In a neighborhood, you don't want your street completely filled up with cars. And then there's an issue of how many people are renting that home next to yours. Is the owner at home at all times in that home? So it separates itself a bit from a bed and breakfast. So there are a lot of issues that are coming to play in it. And I hope that we can find not a compromise, because I think we have a rule. It's there.
You're saying there's always something on the books that needs to be enforced on some level.
Yes, there is. And people, I mean, I feel very strongly that if you spend $800,000 for a beautiful home and you intend to live in it in a very quiet neighborhood, you have a right to an expectation there. But we understand that in one area they're building $8 to $1 million homes to rent. So we have an interesting situation. And that means large groups of people in those types of homes. So there's also the divorced woman or the widower who is using this as an income.
To make the mortgage.
To make their mortgage
To subsidize
payment.
their house payment.
At some point, sometimes maybe you should sell that big house and maybe get a little job. I don't know. There's rather than inconvenience all of your neighbors. I don't know.
Wow. Micheline, what do you think?
I probably have a unique perspective on this because, like Kendall, I mean, he owns his business. I worked for a short-term rental business, and I live in one of those zoned areas for short-term rentals. So my building is mostly empty most of the year, and for holidays and things, it's packed and it's loud and it's crazy, and I don't have a problem with it. And honestly, it is your private property. You should be able to do with it what you want. And I know that people who are for Airbnb have said that they'd be willing to get a business license and pay taxes. So what's wrong with that? And here's the thing. I know people go, well, what if my neighbors are noisy and their tenants are noisy? The same thing you would do if your regular neighbors are noisy. And most of the time, it's not a problem. And so I personally, it's like I can see both sides, but I live in one. It's quiet, it's not a problem. My neighbors are always friendly. I've never had nobody's been weird, nobody's kicked my dog. I'm fine with it.
Where's your dog?
Huh?
I'm a dog lover.
I'm trying. I want to expedite this along because we're coming down to the wire here, and I want to get to our questions if we can. Eric, what do you think?
Well, I think the current code is excessive. I think that Brian mentioned it himself, that he has family and friends over all the time. So what constitutes family and friends? How well do you have to know them before they become a renter? So if someone you just met the day before down in Vegas, they come stay at my house. Is that and maybe you have to pay for something. Maybe give me a few bucks, you can stay at my house. That person's a short-term renter. And under the current law, that's against the rules. So San Francisco, where Airbnb was started from, has really dealt with this, and I think their solution's a really good solution. So they have 2 tiers. One, if you live in your home, you can rent it short-term as long as you're on the premises, all you want. There's no limitation. Because it's your home, and you're renting out a room in your home. And that's no different than having friends over constantly. And you could have parties and friends over constantly, and like Micheline said, that's dealt with through the police officers coming if you're being too noisy. And then in San Francisco, if you don't live there, you can only rent it out 90 days out of the year. So that makes it so you don't end up with a hotel next door to you. But I think that's a really good solution. I would push for that, and I'd push for that immediately if I was on the city council. I think the current code needs to be changed.
All right, Eric, thank you. Lane?
In my misspent youth, I was the director of building and zoning enforcement for Salt Lake County for about 5 years, and also a justice court judge. So I have a little experience in those areas. But I believe in property rights, and it sounds like San Francisco may have a leg up on it. But there is one question. If you redo the code, can you put an exclusion in there for relatives to stay out?
A 72-hour rule kind of thing?
Not my relatives.
Well, I'm kidding, of course, but the key to it, and you hear the horror stories about 55 people come down over the weekend to stay in this house, and there are beer bottles everywhere and junk and 55 cars, but that can be managed. It's back to a management situation, and codes are there to manage for us, and they need to be enforced reasonably, not over-enforced and not unenforced, and that's the secret. Management. Thank you.
Thank you, Lane. Kendall, you've got a special interest in this.
I've been biting at the bit here for some
Right.
time
Go
because
ahead.
it's definitely in my.
But they're not.
my
Our
bailiwick.
audience needs to know where you're coming from.
All right, so I come from the premise, because I own and operate a company called Escape Properties. We bring people from all over the world for all types of
Not
events.
Escape?
Escape.
Okay.
That's exactly the right way to enunciate it. But we bring people from all over the world for events that our city puts together that we don't have enough housing for.
Ironman.
Marathon.
Senior
games is huge. In fact, we're housing several of the senior football, or not football. I wish they played football in the senior games. I would get old.
No,
fast.
I would attend that.
Yeah, pickleball is a great thing, but we're housing a lot of the baseball teams for the senior games, and they love these larger homes, and that's what you start to see out there. Is
that where the beer bottles are coming from?
Well, they're using I think it's prune juice.
Is that
no, I just
Geritol?
lost a vote segment there, didn't I? They're using Red Bull. That's right. But what you're starting to see is the free market is responding, and Lane is correct, and I think a lot of other people have indicated that management is the key to it. When I was at the city council meeting the other night, the number one element that kept coming out is it's the ones that are absentee owner is where you start to see those problems come through. And I've had over 2,000 guest stays in our homes, and I can count 6. And I went back, my wife and I looked long and hard, and we counted up 6 times over 2,000 stays where we had to go out and deal with an unsavory issue. And to me, that's a very low percentage of issues, and it still could be managed. I think it can be tightened up a little bit in that regards. But our company has always collected the transient room tax. In fact, I'm getting ready to write a very large check out to the state. I hate doing it because I like to see the money there. It's pretty. To Lane, L-A-N-E.
Yes.
I'm just kidding. But it's, I don't enjoy paying taxes. I don't enjoy being a tax collector, but we do it as business people because it's what makes our economy run, it's how our societies work. But I've done that with gratitude because what does that do for our community? We have a lot of impact. We talked about water and energy earlier. These people that come into our communities, they use some of those resources and they go. The best way we can recapture that so we can fund those things for us who live here locally is through those taxations. We're over 11.5% in tax collection on those people. The homeowners pay the full brunt of property tax, where we who live here full time, we get a 45% reduction in our property tax. And so those are good things for our economy, but they need to be brought above board and managed well so that we don't have those problems. The city of Hurricane has a very good program in place. I don't want to go quite to the 90-day limitation because I think the free market can regulate itself probably a little bit smoother, but I wouldn't necessarily take it off the table.
It's a working model.
It's a working model. But what I found here is if you have a good home that you decorate well and you get a fair price out in the marketplace, people will come to it. If you have a less than desirable home, you won't be able to sustain it. It'll go away on its own.
Right.
It's just a good free market model, but it needs that little bit of management, and we're very close to that.
Okay. Kendall, thank you.
You bet.
Greg, last thoughts there?
Sure. So personally, I've used Airbnb on quite a few times.
Me too.
I have a lot of friends that also offer their homes up for it. Some in this area against code. And
I found a loophole, by the way. If anybody wants to know about it, I'll share it with them. Sorry.
And as Kendall said, for the most part, I think that the majority of individuals that are using this are not causing problems. So I don't think we should close the door on it completely, but I definitely think as a property owner myself, we need to regulate it in some way as well. So I think there needs to be a middle ground there that we could look at.
All right. We have a little less than 5 minutes here to go through. I would rather give you a chance to capitulate maybe your position, why we should vote for you in that amount of time, and wrap it up from there, and not go to questions if that's all right. Maybe we can schedule another time where we can go through and do that. Brian, can I start on your side of the table and give me your final pitch as we go through? Watch the clock there so we know where we're at, all right?
Hey, again, my name is Brian Theriot, and I would love and ask for your vote on August 11th. If you want a city council candidate who is going to cross his T's and dot his I's for you, you get Brian Theriot. Thank you.
And you do cross the T and dot your I's. Yes. Betty Ariel.
Yes, thank you. This has been a lot of fun, and I appreciate the other candidates for being here and their great ideas. I have thoroughly loved being your city councilwoman, and I have learned so much, and there's so many. I thought, you think you know things until you really get into the nitty-gritty, and but we have great employees at our city, and very good and well-meaning people who are doing a fantastic job, and I think our city speaks for that itself that way. It is clean, beautiful, and desirable for other people to come, and I just strive very hard, and would, if I am reelected, to continue that great heritage that we have here.
Make sure as we go around that your constituents know how to get a hold of you and read your platforms. If you have a website, Brian, you got a website up? Anything that way?
Not up yet, but
okay.
It will be Brian Theriot.
It'll be Brian Theriot with the T cross and the I's dotted.
That's
Betty,
right.
for you?
Betty Ariel.
Okay, BettyAriel.com. All right, Micheline?
Well, you should vote for me because you want someone who's most like most of St. George. Because I'm fairly sure I make the least money out of anybody at this table. So I understand those issues real well. Like I said, I'm a lot younger, so I understand what it's like to try and establish yourself in this community that is growing and has a lot of things that need to be addressed. And I'm starting my family here. You probably can't see, but belly's a little big.
Twins?
No, thank goodness.
I'm a twin.
I'm
so
just going to have the
twins.
baby and the pit bull. We're good to go. And and that's the thing. Is like I've been here and I want to be here, and I want to represent the people that too often haven't been able to be represented because they are working to survive. My website is mperez and then the number 4 sgcity.com. You can also check out my Facebook, and I'm on Twitter. You can, I'm just happy to be here and hear from you in any way that I can.
Great. You just picked up a vote from our director, I think, who is also a big pit bull advocate.
They're great dogs.
Eric?
Hi, I'm Eric. I would like to ask you to vote for me on August 11. I have a website, it's stgeorge.com, spell out the word saint. And on there I have the top 10 things I want to do if I'm elected. I think it's important to get to be very clear about what my key agenda would be, so that if I am elected, there's some mandate there.
Some accountability there.
That's right. So I can say, hey, I got a lot of votes, and this is what I stood for, and it's really clear. So clearly there's a desire for this.
Good.
So if you are curious about the specifics of what I'm running for, stgeorge.com. There's the 10 action items, I call them, and the first of which is to make the city council a more active and idea-driven body. And my business experience in the past, I think, shows that that's my strong point.
Okay, Eric, thank you. Lane?
Lane Rano, my swindle sheet tells it all. Right here it says Lane Rano, candidate, St. George City Council. And this is the important part. Uniquely prepared by the wisdom of the aged to be a city council member. Wisdom means savvy, knowing what needs to be done, knowing how to do it, and doing it. And if you want more information, lanerano.com, and you can find all about me and what I've done and who I've done it to, and what I plan to do in the future. Thank you, Lane Rano.
Thank you, Lane. Kendall Clements.
Well, how do you fall and act like that? I put a lot of thought into my website. It's kendallclements.com, or Who is Kendall. If you'd like to learn a bit more about me, that would be the greatest place to start.
Good. Greg
Thanks.
MacArthur?
Sure thing.
A few seconds.
So my name is Greg MacArthur. I'd like to also ask for your vote on August 11th. If you'd like to find a little bit about me, I'd like to send you to my website as well. It's Greg MacArthur, Greg with 2 G's there at the end. And you can find a little bit more about me there. It'll be up tomorrow.
Great. Greg MacArthur. And all of our candidates, thank you for joining us. Make sure August 11th you get out and vote. You've been watching the St. George City Council Candidate Roundtable for 2015. Voting day is August 11th. If you are looking for more information, you know how to find those talking points on each one of these candidates. My name is Eric Young, and on behalf of the Community Education Channel, thank you for joining us. Have a good night.